Now, all of my tales are based on the fundamental premise that common human laws and interests and emotions have no validity or significance in the vast cosmos at large. H.P. Lovecraft, Letter to Farnsworth Wright, 1927. For the fish, the lake in which he lives is the universe. What does the fish think when he is jerked up by the mouth through the silver limits of existence and into a new universe where the air drowns him and the light is blue madness? Where huge bipeds with no gills stuff it into a suffocating box and cover it with wet weeds to die? The Man in Black, The Gunslinger, Book 1 of Stephen King's Dark Tower series. The old ones know me now. Beneath the waves, beyond the skies, they know my name. I am theirs. I must attend to them as they make their preparations. They will wrest this world from the light. They will drown the cities and swallow the mountains. They will burst the moon and drain the sun. They will draw the earth back into the darkness from which it frothed. They will flood the universe until the horizon is abandoned and there is no barrier between the sea and sky. All shall be at peace then, tranquil and still, but for their fitful stirrings. Our puny existence is an affront to them, for theirs is the truest claim upon existence. All lives, all creation must be extinguished. I understand this now, and I welcome it. Tomorrow I will go into the water. I will take as many with me as I can. Darkness Beyond by Jason Franks. Ah yes, my wonderful childhood. Quiet afternoons spent watching television with my grandfather. Those were the days indeed. Back then, I used to watch a lot of cartoons and TV shows from the channel known as Star World, which broadcasted from Hong Kong. Most of what I watched were G.I. Joe, Transformers, Gem and the Holograms, and Robotech, which I later learned was derived from the anime Macross, but that will be a story for another day. My American grandfather would occasionally join me on these afternoons and provide hilarious commentary on what was going on. My young mind would be blown apart, however, once I caught sight of the animated feature known as Inhumanoids, my first foray into the genre of cosmic horror. Hi, hello, and welcome again everybody to another episode of Natural Juan. This time around, we're going to discuss the cartoon show Inhumanoids from Hasbro, the same creators of well-loved franchises like Transformers, My Little Pony, and G.I. Joe. Before all that though, shout out to Mr. Jonathan Green, a longtime supporter of this channel. Also, here's to our sponsor Dermhaven. If you don't want to end up looking like an Inhumanoid, you know where to go. And let's not forget, congratulations to Miss Rochelle Augustin, who has finally made it to the rank of team leader at my workplace. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let us now dive deep and discover more about the Inhumanoids. Inhumanoids was a short-lived cartoon first aired in 1986. It was created by Flint Dill, who is well known for his work on G.I. Joe, Transformers, and the animated feature An American Tail, Fievel Goes West. The script for the show was written by Larry Parr, and the show itself was directed by Ray Lee. While it was mostly made in the USA, it was animated in Japan by none other than Toei Animation. That is also notable for Japanese anime like Sailor Moon, Slam Dunk, and Mazinger Z. There was also a line of toys made for the show, much like other offerings by Hasbro, but sadly, it was short-lived, much like the show, which eventually led to the cancellation of both. While Hasbro and Toei Animation have made numerous offerings over the years, I would say that Inhumanoids is somewhat unique in that it was one of the first shows to introduce young audiences to the genre of cosmic horror and the concept of eldritch abominations. To simplify, Cosmic horror is a genre of horror with elements of science fiction that shows audiences that the world man knows is but a tiny part of the actual world, and that there are many unknown and possibly unknowable things that are out there in the depths of the ocean, beneath the earth, or above the heights of the sky. An eldritch abomination is best defined as a being that is a largely incomprehensible entity that is far beyond the scope of human understanding in terms of physical appearance, mental processes, moral ideals, or all of the above. Eldritch abominations aren't always evil, mind you, and some might even be considered good. However, they are often so different from what we perceive as normal that they may become harmful to our well-being, and there are those of them, or should I say, many of them, that are careless towards humans or other mortal beings, and only seek to subjugate or enslave them much the same way people treat pets, livestock, and other organisms deemed useful. Inhumanoids centers on the titular Inhumanoids, which are eldritch abominations that serve as villains of the show. This is another first for Hasbro and Toei, as the show is titled after the villains rather than the heroes, like G.I. Joe or Cops. Also note that while the creators made efforts to make the show child or family friendly at the time, it was still quite terrifying for viewers. As a matter of fact, it is still quite terrifying for some adult audiences to this very day. There are 3 main Inhumanoids in the show itself, which are later joined by 3 more, although there are hints that there might actually be a lot more of them. They are Macleod, the demonic leader of the Inhumanoids, Decompose, the undead horror and dumb muscle of the group, and Tendril, the Cthulhu-like monster composed of plant matter, who serves as the Inhumanoids' all-around henchman. They serve as the show's main antagonists and, unlike most villains made by Hasbro, such as the terrorist organization Cobra in G.I. Joe and the evil Decepticons of Transformers, the Inhumanoids don't just have a good chance of winning, but will most likely conquer the world by default if the actual heroes of the show, Earthcore and the Mutores, didn't put so much effort into thwarting their plans and vanquishing them. To explain this last point, I will go over each Inhumanoid, their natures and powers. I'll start with who is probably the weakest, or at least less apocalyptic of the Inhumanoids, Tendril. Towering and green, Tendril is a monster composed entirely of plant matter. He has a tentacled face that overhangs with vines, leaves, and roots, making him somewhat resemble Cthulhu from the works of H.P. Lovecraft. Instead of the normal limbs of ordinary beings we would easily recognize, Tendril's arms and hands are nothing more than masses of vines that form into tentacles that somewhat resemble hands and fingers, although still don't really match that of humans. What truly makes him a formidable monstrosity is his ability to regenerate. Whenever the heroes or anyone else damages him enough to remove parts of his body, these other pieces manage to heal and grow, becoming a smaller version of himself that will obey his commands. Indeed, he has even been shown to weaponize this ability, shedding off parts of himself to become minor minions that he often uses to attack enemies that would get in the way of his goals. Luckily though, he does not seem to be very intelligent and can be easily manipulated. In fact, he was contained ages ago by the Granites, a race of beings composed of solid rock, by trapping him in a stone cell where he could not escape from. Next, of course, would be Decompose, the enormous monster made of rotten flesh and a mix of both dinosaur and countless human bones. He is reminiscent of other undead abominations that would come later, such as Nito from the Dark Souls franchise or the Necromorphs of the Dead Space universe. Also, due to him being made of many other skeletons, he brings to mind the Gasha Dokuro of Japanese mythology and folklore. His head is that of a skull of some ancient theropod, most likely that of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, or that of a giant venomous serpent with large saber-like fangs, or a horrid mix between the two. He has wicked claws like those found on a Deinonychus or Velociraptor, and it is these two that one has to really watch out for, as I will explain in just a bit. His entire body is muscular and powerful like those of an enormous ape, bringing to mind other titanic primates like King Kong or Mighty Joe Young, with the only difference being, and most probably disturbing, is that his entire musculature appears to be in an advanced state of decay, or decomposing, as per his namesake. But the horror of decompose doesn't stop there, mind you. What truly makes him terrifying is his ability to animate the dead into subservient zombies or transform the still living into undead servants. All he needs to do is touch them with his filth-ridden claws, and the remains of the dead will reanimate into hideous, undead servitors. And any living beings he might caress with his awful talons will mutate into becoming horrors, trapped between the living and the dead, and cursed to serve the whim of the horrible monster. However, despite the terror he might inspire, Decompose has two glaring weaknesses that the heroes of the show manage to exploit time and time again in order to vanquish and contain him. The first of which is sunlight, which has been shown on numerous occasions to severely weaken him and his minions. As a matter of fact, the Mutoris managed to defeat him in the ancient times by using the very light of the sun against him. This goes double for any of his undead creations, as exposing them to sunlight will return reanimated horrors into inert corpses again, and people who have been transformed into giant zombified monsters will revert into ordinary human beings with very little to no ill effects. Another of Decompose's weaknesses is the substance of amber or tree sap, a liquid produced from trees. Both at the beginning and at the very end of the show, Decompose is shown to have been defeated and contained by the creatures called redwoods, beings who are actually mobile trees with human-like faces using amber produced from their own bodies. Last, and arguably the most powerful, would be the metallic demon Metlar, who is by far the mightiest of the Inhumanoids and serves as their leader in their bid to reclaim the earth for their own purposes. Formed from a metallic body, Metlar resembles a horned devil whose powerful physique is covered head to toe in scales of metal. Even the parts of his body that resemble living flesh is hinted to be composed of metal as well, and even just the thought of harming him seems like an impossible task. Deadly substances like fire and magma seem not to affect him at all, and he has time and time again used it as a weapon against the heroes, hurling balls of fire or globs of magma or lava to devastating effect. Another power Metlar has is his ability to animate lifeless statues by transferring the fiery metal substances that come from his own body, allowing him to create armies of walking statues. That said, much like the other Inhumanoids, Metlar is burdened with weaknesses, the first of which is his vulnerability to magnetism. Being composed of metal, he is weakened and possibly even actively harmed by strong magnetic fields, such as those produced by his mortal enemy Magnacore, who seems to have the power to manipulate the very magnetic fields of Earth itself. Another of Metlar's main weaknesses is water, although this is not really elaborated upon in the show itself. However, it is, when fully considered, plausible for such a monster. After all, a being made of metal and fire would mean that water would cause him to rust, and for his internal flames, which also serve as his weapons, to cool and become largely useless. Of all the animated features to come and go during my childhood, Inhumanoids is one of those that has left a mark on me as a person, not just in terms of being scary. I can even say that I would put it up there right beside classics like G.I. Joe and Transformers. Sadly, it never became as popular as the aforementioned two, and was why it would be cancelled after just one season composed of 13 episodes and just one toy line. Overall, I think that Hasbro just didn't think their marketing through with the show. They were likely trying to explore new avenues of entertainment such as horror and fantasy, as was the case with Visionaries and Cops. But they failed at going further with this, likely because of sentiments at the time and the general attitude of the common populace. They probably intended Inhumanoids as a new horror franchise, but it proved too disturbing for the young audiences they were trying to cater to. All in all, I really think that Hasbro up and squandered the franchise, as when their only horror franchise failed, they moved to the much more controversial Ouija boards. I will discuss the concept of Ouija boards and my opinion of them at a later video, but as a practicing Catholic, I really think that Hasbro has made a big mistake in promoting something possibly dangerous over something that is fictional and, relatively speaking, harmless. I mean, sure, Inhumanoids was quite disturbing, especially when Decompose's ability to transform human beings into monsters is showcased. But at the end of the day, they were just made-up monsters composed of plastic. I mean, Macleod may look demonic, but he was never real to begin with, and has no way of actually harming people, unless you count the occasional earthquake and volcanic eruption as his work. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Natural Juan. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. If you'd also like to support this channel, you can find my Patreon, PayPal, and Gcash information in the description below. Natural Juan, out.